Okay, we're going to get started now. So thank you everyone for joining us for this month's IABC Asia Pacific webinar. We host these webinars bi-monthly on a range of different topics relevant to communications professionals. We host them for IABC members as well as non-members, so everyone is welcome to join. So please do share these webinars through your networks. IABC is the Association for Communications Professionals, and we have members in over 70 countries around the globe. We provide a wealth of information through our website, events, professional development opportunities. We offer certification, conferences, and also fabulous networking opportunities. Being a member will give you access to exclusive member-only content and videos. It'll also give you significant discounts on professional development, certification, and conferences. And in fact, in September this year, we are going to be hosting our second annual regional conference, Fusion, in Melbourne. And we're currently offering some fantastic early bird rates, but just for another 2 weeks. So get in quick, and you can get registration for this 2-day event for just $590 for members, or $890 for a join and go package, which also then offers you a discount off IABC membership as well. So we've just announced that Tracy Spicer will be a keynote, and of course she's the Australian author, journalist and broadcaster, and she is sure to be brilliant. We'll also be releasing the rest of the program very shortly. Okay, so I would now like to hand over to our presenter today, Mel Kettle. So in 2006, Mel established her communication consultancy focused on helping people to communicate effectively, to attract, retain, and engage their customers and clients. Mel has worked on as a communication and social media consultant with a range of professionals, from CEOs and executive management teams, researchers and academics, to member-based organisations and not-for-profits. Mel has worked in comms roles for over 25 years and in the digital and social media space for about 10. In her spare time, she likes to cook, read, and just hang out with family and friends, and she's the host of the podcast A Great Recipe for Life, which I'm looking forward to listening to. I've only just discovered it today. Today, Mel's going to show us how social media can help our organisations to stand out by providing the tools to better engage with our customers. She's going to share real-life examples and practical ideas to show us the 5 key skills to increase customer engagement using social media. Mel, thank you so much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about this.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm looking forward to sharing. And hello, everyone. Now, I have just come back after a bit of a lengthy work travel trip away, and I've had a bit of a cough this morning. So if I cough, I just apologise in advance. But I do have my cup of tea here to help alleviate that as I cough immediately. Today I'm talking primarily about the 5 key skills you need to increase customer engagement using social media. So it'll be quite social media focused because that's what I love, and I know that a lot of people would like to use it more effectively so that it has greater impact, and so that you can use it in a way that helps your customers get to know you, like you, and trust you more effectively, because we do know that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. So I'm sitting in Brisbane today, which is where I live, and I would love to know a little bit more about you. So if you can just type into the chat box where you're from. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type them into either the Q&A or to the chat box, and I'll have some time for questions at the end. If there's anything I say that you don't understand, then please let me know. And when I say where you're from, it would be great to know your location as well as the organisation that you represent, so that I can get a bit of a sense of who's, if you're small business, government, non-profit, wherever you might be. And I'm seeing there's a few people from New Zealand, excellent, and other parts of Australia. Adelaide, I was in Adelaide last week early this week for the AusAid conference, which is the Australian Society of Association Executives. So beautiful city you have there. All right, lots of answers coming through. Thank you. So yes, if you just continue, any questions, any problems, if you have sound problems, if you have tech problems, pop them into the chat box. And if there's a sound or a tech problem, Lisa can hopefully fix that out for you. And if it's any other questions, then I'll take those as we go. So lots of, thanks. Lots of great comments coming through. So social media, we no longer have a choice as to whether we do social media. The question is how well we do it. I'm fairly sure this is not a new quote to many of you. Eric Qualman, who does a fantastic video series or video every year on the state of social media, gave this quote, I would say 5 or 6 years ago. And the fact that there's many organizations who are still trying to justify that they use social media in their organization is quite surprising to me, because for me, social media is as important to your marketing and comms as accepting credit card payments is to your finance. And you wouldn't have a finance department that didn't accept credit card payments if you're in business. So why would you have a communications department that doesn't accept or that doesn't use social media? So I'd like to know, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in your organizations with social media? This is your time to let me know. Again, just type some in the chat box and I'll go through a couple of those that I know that you have. So internal or external, yeah, either internal or external is good. Low engagement, a challenge is getting a high engagement rate. Well, hopefully a few of these things that we talk about today will give you some ideas. Engagement as we're B2B. I actually think engagement as B2B is far easier than B2C, because you can be a lot more specific and you tend to know often more clearly who your audience is. Timely approvals in regulated environments. Yes, we can talk about a couple of ways you can sort that out, hopefully. Not understanding what's appropriate for the platform. Yes. Internal trolling. Oh, that's an unfortunate one. Okay, demonstrating value to clients, giving a voice that has personality for customers rather than the corporate voice or the board voice. Yeah, some great comments coming through. So thank you very much. Demonstrating value to clients, that seems to be a fairly core challenge that many people have. And so I'm not surprised at all to see that quite a few of you are struggling with that, because that's something that's difficult. You know, demonstrating value is often one of the hardest things, and one of the biggest challenges when it comes to demonstrating value is actually knowing what your customer defines as value. So what do they expect to get from you, whether you're providing a product or a service to them. So organisations that use social media to engage positively with their customers have a higher rate of trust. There was some research around this in Harvard Business Review early last year, and it continued on to say that organisations high in trust report 76% more engagement. Organisations high in trust also have far greater productivity within in-house within their organisation, and a lesser turnover of staff, because people want to work with people or work with organisations that their customers like. So have a think about, as we go through this session, how you can maybe look at using social media to engage with your customers. And that can be whether they're internal customers or external customers. So a lot of organisations that I've worked with have had real struggles in demonstrating, just communicating in-house, because they haven't had a very strong internal communications function. And it can be a really hard sell sometimes to promote internal comms to your senior management team, especially as if they believe that internal comms is just the staff magazine, which is the case in a couple of organisations I've worked in. The social media can help you stand out, and it can do this by helping you increase engagement. So we have, there's an engagement ladder that I like to talk about of how you can use social media to engage customers. So if we have a look at the ladder on the screen, you can see at the very bottom of it, you're not doing anything on social media. So there's no value to either you or to your customers, and your engagement is usually not very good. As we go up the ladder, we move into one-way communication. So we're observing, we're looking to see what people are doing. We might be broadcasting our communication messages, which is, again, very one way. We might have a Twitter account, for example, but only be using it to send out things that you're doing. It might be promoting events, it might be promoting products or services that you offer. Broadcasting communications on social media is very often similar to advertising. You don't engage with people, you don't have conversations with people. It's very much about promoting who you are and what you do. And you might get a little bit of engagement, or you might get a few people talking to you, but you're actually not really engaging, because quite often in this phase, you're not having that conversation, you're not returning those conversations. So then we move from one-way communication to two-way communication, where we start to have conversations with people. And this is where your organisation and you start to become known. So your engagement increases, people are starting to, develop that sense of know, like, and trust, and they're starting to want to do work with you. So as we move on with that, the more conversations you have, the more likely you are to develop relationships with people. And when you have relationships with people, the benefits are enormous from a business perspective. It means that if you make a mistake, people are going to be far more forgiving. If you run out of a product, or if you have a sale and it's not available, then people are more likely to be forgiving. People are more likely to do business with you in a difficult time if they've already got a relationship with you. A woman I knew quite a few years ago owned a small winery outside of Canberra, and over the winter, she said she just tweeted like a crazy person because there was nothing else to do really where she lived at night when it was cold. So she tweeted about the winery, the challenges of running a small business, the restaurant that they had attached to the winery, a lot about food and wine and what she liked and what she didn't like. She talked a little bit about TV. MasterChef was on one of its early seasons at this time, so she talked a lot about, food shows on television and what was happening on MasterChef. And she built a lot of relationships with people. So she had a lot of conversations. She was very open to answering questions about the wine that they produced and about the cellar door that they had. And a year or two later, when the GFC hit, their business actually doubled. And she attributes that to the conversations and the relationships that she built on Twitter over the previous 12 to 18 months. And people would say to her, our budgets are tight, we don't have as many people coming into our restaurants, but we still would like to buy your wine, because even though we've never met, I feel that we have a genuine friendship because of all of those nights that you spoke to me over Twitter. So that's an example of the power that social media can have in helping you engage with your customers. And then once you've, got a great relationship with people, or great relationships with many people, you create this community, and you really start to see that when, more so in the bad times than in the good times. And a really great example of a community that's come together recently is there's a little independent bookshop in Brisbane called Avid Reader, and they were being attacked by trolls last year. So a couple of their former staff, who happened to have fairly good social media profiles, put out on Twitter and on Facebook, hey, Avid Reader's being attacked by trolls. Can we just give them some love and start giving them some 5-star reviews on Facebook? Well, within a week, they had 2,000 5-star reviews, and within a month, they had 4,000. And this is a really great example of a community that comes together because they trust the sellers, the bookstore, and everybody involved with it. So I love this example because Avid Reader has worked really, really hard for a really long time to build a community, both online and offline. And when they needed their community to help them through a slightly difficult time, or a very difficult time, they really stood up. So just have a quick look at this. And Lisa, if you can pop the poll up, please. I'd really like to see where you are in your organisation on this ladder. So I've got a poll question that'll pop up. Here we go. So if you can just answer have a look and see where you are Are you doing nothing? Are you observing? Are you broadcasting? Are you having conversation? What relationships? And if you can just type in the box or click the button that says whereabouts you are, and then I'll give you a minute or two. Lisa, for some reason I can't see what's happening in the poll.
Okay, I can tell you, or I can try and make it visible to you. So I'll give a running commentary. 57% of people are saying broadcasting. 9% are saying observing.
Great.
26% conversation.
Great.
4% relationship, 4% community, and nobody is doing nothing.
Yay! That's fantastic. And those numbers are, like, I've asked this poll on a number of webinars and in lots of groups that I speak to, and those responses are really common. The most common response is we use social media to broadcast, followed by a little bit of conversation, and then less in the relationships and community factor stages. There's always some people who are observing. There's usually a couple of people who admit to doing nothing. There's usually more people who are doing nothing but don't admit. So if you're in the doing nothing, observing and broadcasting phases, the good news is that you'll learn how you can move away from those phases over the next 45 minutes that we have to talk today.
So maybe you're seeing it now. Has that popped up now?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So hopefully you can everybody else can see that as well. So yeah, so that's about what I expected. So thank you to those who responded. And yeah, so the good news is that a lot of you have a social media presence, and we just need to look at how can you move out of that one-way communication into two-way. So I equate this with falling in love. This is a picture of me and my beloved. We met on RSVP many, many, many years ago when it was not a thing. And we were so embarrassed by how we met that we lied to our families for a very long time because we just didn't think they needed to know. But it's a bit like, the ladder of engagement is very similar to having a personal relationship. You start, you're single, you're not interested, and then you think, okay, maybe I am ready to meet somebody. So you have a look at what's out there and you just see who's there. What does the pool of single people that I might be attracted to look like? And then you might broadcast your intent to start dating. And it might be that you join an online dating service such as RSVP or Tinder or whatever else is available. It's been a long time since I've had to do that. Or you might tell your friends and say, hey, I'm ready to date. Can you set me up? Do you know somebody who's single who I might like? And then you have a couple of dates, you have conversations, or you might have online conversations if it's through an online dating platform. And then, you're ready, you might go out on a few dates, and before you know it, you're in a relationship. And then the pinnacle of that is when you move in together or you get married and you have children and you create your own community. And you create your own community of people who support you, which is known also as a family in our personal world. So think about it that way. The other thing I want you to remember is this is a slow process. Dating is a slow process. You don't fall in love and marry somebody you meet on the first date unless you're on a really bad TV show. I'm sure you all know the one I mean. And social media is the same. Communicating with your customers is the same. It takes time for people to get to know you, like you, and trust you. However, social media can help speed up that process because you've got many more opportunities to touch base with people and to have those touch points where you can demonstrate value and ask them questions and, show an interest in who they are and what they do. So successful communication is where you've got you know who your customer is, you create content that meets their needs and it helps solve their problems, and you share it on a channel where they hang out. So you really need to know who your customers are if you're wanting to be able to communicate with them effectively. And this goes for social media as well as offline and non-digital media. And an example is you wouldn't necessarily advertise a high-end female perfume in a football magazine because they're not going to be rarely will they be the same buyers. So, know your customer, know who they are, know what problems they have, and you can find this out by asking them. Or if you're using social media, you can find it out by listening. Because one thing I've really noticed over the last 10 years or so of me being active on social media is that people complain and criticize and share the love for many, 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 many different things on their social media channels. And people have conversations with other people on social media, forgetting sometimes, I think, that it's a public channel and that anybody can see it. So if you don't have, alerts set up for your brand name or for the names of your key senior people in your organization, and if you're not searching on those names on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on Instagram, then you're missing opportunities to find out what people say about you and what people think about the services and the products that they buy from other people in your industry as well as from you. So social listening is a great way of finding out what the pain points are for your customers. Now, for the next probably 20 minutes or so, I want to talk about the 5 key skills that can really help you increase your customer engagement. So the first one is being strategic. We all know, when I talk about being strategic, it's more than just having a communication strategy. I really want to encourage you to start thinking strategically. And by this, I mean, there's loads of ways that you can think strategically to help you demonstrate value to your customers. So the first thing is, be aware of current trends. What's happening in your industry? When was the last time you did an environmental analysis of what's happening in your space? So think about, what are some of the trends? Well, some of the trends today are generational. Gen Z has very different needs and live their lives very differently to how baby boomers live their lives, for example. But if both of these target demographics are in your customer base, you need to know what's impacting on both of them. And, from a social media perspective, the Census social media report, which is an absolutely brilliant report. If you don't have access, if you haven't read it, you should download it. It's just census.com.au/social, I think. Have a look at that report because it will tell you what consumers and businesses are doing and thinking about social media in Australia. And one of the things the latest version of the report tells us is that 99% of, hang on a sec. Okay. Sorry, husband's just going to work. 99% of Australians aged between the ages of 18 and 29 have a social media presence and are actively using social media. And of that, 81% use Instagram. So if you're looking at, it's the census, Andrew's census. Actually, if you want my notes from this presentation, just pop your email in the chat box and I can email them out to you. So I can send you my notes and any links that I mention and also a copy of my slides. So just pop your email in the chat box and I can send it out to you later today. I was going to say, oh, and Lisa, can you just capture anything that people ask for? So I can get that back to them as well, please.
Sure can.
Thanks very much. Where was I? So Census social media report. Yes, so it tells us that 79% of Australians overall use social media. Approximately 50% of businesses have a social media presence. So there's a bit of a disconnect there between businesses using social media and consumers using social media. 81% of people between the ages of 18 and 29 use Instagram, 77% use Snapchat. If you're targeting those groups and you have not thought about using either of those social media platforms, potentially you're missing a lot of opportunities. So you need to have a think about how you can be incorporating those in your social media strategy. Other trends are that we really need to be aware of is the growing use of AI and AR and virtual reality, the significant increasing popularity of video, particularly Instagram stories, and Facebook Live and other forms of live streaming. From social perspective, we need to look at the fact that we're becoming a more city-centric community. Now, in Australia, there's a lot of talk around people moving and having a tree change or a sea change, but globally, people are moving to cities. So what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your organisation? And what does that mean in terms of how you're engaging with your customers? The next thing we need to think about when we think strategically is we need to think about how often do we take time out just to think and reflect. You know, in all of my years in business and as an employee, I've only ever worked with 2 managers who regularly carved out time from their diaries, to have thinking time. Now, it's something that I'm personally not fantastic at, but I'm trying to spend a half a day a week thinking. And this sounds like it's, you know, a lovely thing to do, because that wouldn't be nice if we could all spend loads of time thinking. But I'm finding, since I'm thinking, that it's making me so much more aware of the challenges that my clients have. And because I'm thinking about things like, how can I solve their problems? How can I find out what their challenges are? And it's making me a lot better and a lot more effective at my job. And some of the ways that I think are to read magazines such as Harvard Business Review. You know, I signed up to a subscription of that last year, and while I do have a growing pile of magazines on my office floor, because I don't always get to read them, I do at least flick through and find out what's happening in key industries that are relevant to me and to my clients, and that's making a difference. There's also so many amazing industry books and blogs and videos and podcasts that, you know, that give me information that make me think more strategically and creatively as to how I can help my clients and provide better service to them. So even if you've only got, you know, half an hour a week, try and allocate a little bit of time to thinking strategically, or to taking some time to think and reflect. And then the other thing about thinking strategically is it's about asking questions. Don't just assume you know the answers. I was at a conference recently and one of the sponsors, I was just chatting to them and I said to them, what's the value for you? So you're a sponsor, you've paid a lot of money here to be a sponsor. What value, what do you have to get for you to say this conference was worth it? And all they wanted was to meet 10 specific people off the registration list of 300. So they knew the list, they knew the people they wanted to meet, and it was just a matter of going and finding them and having a conversation. And that to them was value in attending. So so by asking questions, if the organizer had asked that question and knew that response, then they could very easily say, let me introduce you. I know those 10 people personally. How can I introduce you to them? So asking questions can really help open up your mind to opportunities. Of course, with being strategic also has a component of strategic planning. So I would really hope that you have a communication strategy and possibly a social media strategy within your organisation. And if you don't have a communication strategy will ideally incorporate your social media, and it will feed into your strategic intent and your business planning. So from a strategic planning perspective, I say to my clients, first you need to know what's your strategic plan, what's your overarching strategic plan for your organisation. And then out of that, we can develop a marketing communication strategy. And then out of that, we can develop a social media strategy. So when a lot of people come to me and say, can you help me with my social media? And I always say, well, yes, I can, but do you have a communication strategy? And what are your overarching goals and objectives? And then what are your communication goals and objectives? And if they don't know that, you need to start with that. You need to go there first. The other thing you need to know from strategic planning is you need to do some risk mitigation. I'm not going to talk too much about risk mitigation today because that's a whole other topic for another time with another person who's a lot better at it than me. But risk mitigation, from a social media perspective, one of the things that businesses and CEOs and boards say the most to me is we're very risk averse. Social media seems a little bit risky to us. How do we make sure that people don't say bad things about us? Well, if you have a risk mitigation strategy that ties in with your social media policy, then you can help alleviate some of those concerns by having suggested responses when things do go wrong. So plan what's going to happen. Sit down and have a brainstorming session and identify all the possible things that could go wrong with your social media. People could say bad things about you. You could be trolled. You could be in a situation like HMV in the UK were many years ago, where their entire communications team got fired and people were live tweeting it from the meeting that was firing them because nobody had changed the password. So think about what is it that you are worried about, and then put some mitigation tactics in place. And I'm certainly happy to talk more about that if anybody has any questions at another time. And then have a social media policy. Make it really clear who in your organisation is allowed to use your formal social media accounts. What can they say? What can't they say? But then also have a policy for all of your staff. What do you want your staff to say about you when they're talking about their work on social media? And don't pretend people don't, because everybody talks about about the work that they do in some form of social, whether it's having a bitch about the boss on their private Facebook page, or whether it's blogging about things that relate to their business, or whether it's just commenting on business things on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Give people permission to talk about you, and give people permission to to share the good news about your organisation, but then also be quite clear about what you don't want people to talk about. So if you run public events, then maybe you are very happy for your staff to talk about those. However, you probably don't want them to give their personal opinion if the CEO gets sacked, because that's a little bit inappropriate. So have a clear social media policy, setting out guidelines, and also setting out the consequences if it goes wrong. Someone has asked for a template for a social media strategy. I wrote a blog post about that a little while ago, and I've got some examples of best practice. So if you pop your email in the chat box, I'll send that to you as well, so that you can get some ideas as to how you can incorporate or develop a social media strategy for your organisation. The one thing I strongly emphasize is keep it simple. Try not to make it more than 1 or 2 pages, and make it as simple as possible. And then provide some training around it so that people have a clear understanding of what you can and can't do. Moving right along to skill number 2. A little bit linked to skill number 1 in some aspects, but being customer service focused. I'm sure we all know the quote from Maya Angelou: people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is essential when it comes to customer service. Making people feel valued is going to make them want to do business with you again. And that's important because it costs 5 to 10 times more to get a new customer than to keep an existing one. And what we need to know, and what we know more and more, is that people are deciding how they feel about your business based on their customer experience. So Jay Baer, who's an American marketing and customer service expert, says that customer service strategy, oh my God, I can't remember his exact quote, but basically what he says is that what you do offline gets shared offline. What you do offline gets shared online. Sorry, wrong way around. And he says that people are going to share the experiences they have with you if they're really, really good and if they're really, really bad. So people don't share the meh. So think about how can you be creating really, really great experiences for your customers. And the other thing we know, some more research that was in the Harvard Business Review a year or two ago says that a 5% improvement in customer service can yield a 25 to 100% increase in profit. And if you think back to the slide that I had earlier in the presentation, organisations high in trust report 76% more engagement, while organisations high in trust also receive significantly more, significant increases in sales and in profit. So the next couple of moments, I just want to talk more about how you can improve your customer service using social media. And there's 8 steps. The first one is really obvious. You need to have a presence. You need to be engaging with people using social media, and you need to be on the channels where they are. So if you work in the B2C space, then chances are a lot of your customers are going to be on Facebook. If you're more in the B2B space, then think more about how you could use LinkedIn. If you're wanting to engage with the media, then a lot of the journalists have Twitter. So have a think about where do your customers hang out, and start there. Definitely not advocating that everybody uses every social media channel, because you can't do them all well, especially if you've got limited resources. But have a presence in the most common place where your customer base is and where they go to get information. And the way you find that out is by asking them. The second thing you need to make sure is that you're mobile friendly. People are using their mobile phones for pretty much everything these days, and you need to be mobile aware. If you have a website that isn't mobile enabled, then you're missing out on a lot of opportunity. In terms of your content, make sure that your content looks good on a mobile screen, and test it. If you're writing something on a computer and it's going up on a blog site or it's going on your social media channels, then have a look on your phone and see what it looks like. The third thing is have a plan. We've talked about having a social media strategy, and your plan needs to include things like, what are your goals and objectives? Who's your target audience? What are their problems, and what are the key messages so that you can help them solve their problems? What are the communication strategies and tactics that you're going to use? What is your budget, and what's your time frame? And then all of your goals and objectives need to be measurable, and you need to be including what are the metrics that you're going to use to determine whether it's been successful or not. And I'll talk a little bit more about metrics at the end of this presentation. So then the third thing is know your audience problems, know your customer problems. Why is it that they come to you? Now, you might create a product or a service and think it's got one specific purpose, but your customers might use it for something else. And the example that I love for this is, does everybody remember the movie, or has everybody seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? And the father used Windex to fix every single problem he had. So yes, I'm sure he used it to clean windows, but if you had a pimple, put some Windex on it. If he used it for many different ways. So understand why your audience comes to you and what they want from you. And quite often they come to you for a reason that might not be one you've considered. Fifth is create experiences that will surprise and delight. So Jay Baer talks about surprising and delighting. What is an experience that you can create that you can replicate over time, that's simple and that's worthy of being talked about? So think about, and an example here is, I was in New York a couple of years ago and I stayed at the hotel DoubleTree by Hilton, which is a chain of hotels. It's a lower, it's one of the lower value Hilton brands. And I checked in, I was really late because my flight was delayed. It was freezing, it was raining, I'd been traveling all day. By the time I eventually arrived there, it was 1 a.m. and I just wanted to have a cup of tea and go to bed. So I walk in and the man who's checking me in says, "Welcome to DoubleTree by Hilton." I'm like, "Yeah, thanks very much." He said, "Here's a cookie." I'm like, what? He said, here's a chocolate chip cookie, and they give a chocolate chip cookie to every single person who checks in to a DoubleTree by Hilton. Now, it was warm. It had been out of the oven for about 20 minutes because they bake them every hour. They bake them on site, so they're not coming in from somewhere else. It was warm, it was gooey, and it went really, really well with that cup of tea that I eventually got. But Jay Baer did some research with DoubleTree by Hilton, and he said he interviewed, or he surveyed 5,000 of their customers, and he said, how many of you have shared the cookie on social media? And it was 34%. 34% of their customers share this experience because it surprises and delights. Now, I just was dumbfounded when he told me that. So have a think about, what experiences are you giving your customers that surprise and delight? Now, the cookie probably costs 30 cents a customer, if that. It's not expensive. It's something that can be scaled, and it's something that can definitely get talked about. So think about, how can you provide something like that in your organisation? And then number 6 is, look at how we can give value. How are you giving value to your customers? And then once you've given value, or ask for feedback. Some research I read last year, and I can't remember where it was, but it said people expect a business to ask them for feedback. Whether you're B2B or B2C, ask your customers, what do you think of us? Are we doing a good job? What can we do better? What did you like about what we did? And when you ask for feedback, you can do that by asking for testimonials, by asking them to give you a rating and a review on your Google Facebook page, or your Google page, or on your Facebook page. If you're asking for testimonials, ask for video testimonials as well as written testimonials, and then share them, because people do business with people they know, like, and trust, but people also look to see, they look for, they want to know what people are saying about your business, because that helps them make a decision to use your business. So people look to influencers, and people look to, particularly women particularly like to have that social proof that somebody they know, or that somebody within their peer group recommends the service or the product that they're about to purchase. And then the final 8th step in being customer service focused is be kind, be patient, show empathy, and show gratitude. Say thank you. It fascinates me how few people, both business and professionals, say thank you. There's somebody who I know who keeps on sending me Facebook messages asking me questions. So he's done this 3 times now, and on each of these 3 occasions, he hasn't even responded to acknowledge that I've sent him some information. So do you think I'm going to send it again? No, I'm not. In fact, the next time he asks me for something, I'm going to say, did you actually get the information you asked for the last 3 times when I sent it? Because you've never acknowledged it. So think about how you feel when people don't thank you for the work that you do, whether it's a part of your job or not. People like to be felt. People need to feel needed, and saying thank you just helps that improve even more. Right. I'm moving right along. So Mark Schaefer talks about being more human in every engagement and every comment. So think about, how can you be more human in order to provide better customer service? And one of my favourite examples is when I was on the train a year or so ago. I was reading a really sad book, and Queensland Rail, and I tweeted about it, and Queensland Rail tweeted me back saying, would you like tissues on your arrival? Now, I didn't mention Queensland Rail in my post. All I said was crying on the train. But they obviously had some search alerts in place to comment when that was mentioned. So again, this comes back down to doing some clever social listening. I'm seeing a few questions starting to come through, and I'm leaving a few minutes at the end to answer those. So if you do have any questions, don't forget, just pop them in the box. Okay, the 3rd skill is creative. Everybody has creativity in them, you just might not think it. I grew up in a very creative household, and my ability to draw, paint, or do anything that to me was even slightly creative was non-existent. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that everybody can be creative and we all show it in different ways. So I show creativity through cooking and through baking. No, that's not a cake I made. It's one I ripped off the internet, but from Shutterstock, which I paid for. But work out what your creativity is. And maybe if you're looking to find some creativity, set yourself a 30-day creativity challenge. And it could be 30 days, I'm going to read something every day. I'm going to meditate every day. Maybe you'll unplug from technology every day. Maybe you'll bake something every day. And I can guarantee your work colleagues are going to love that one if you do, because I did that once. Think about, take a photo a day. There's plenty of photo a day challenges. Excuse me. Maybe send a handwritten card to somebody different every day. Maybe make a card every day. Think about some ways that you can just challenge that part of your brain, that creative part of your brain that might not get to see very much, and do something different to stimulate those thought processes, both subconsciously and consciously every day. Now, in terms of content, one of the things that we all need to be doing is creating content that cuts through the clutter. And there's a few different ways you can do this. Storytelling is probably the best way, regardless of what kind of content you're creating, whether it's words, whether it's images, whether it's video, whether it's audio. The more you tell stories, the more likely people are to be engaged. And think about yourself, if you hear a story, you're far more likely to remember it than if you just hear a series of statistics. So look at how you can incorporate storytelling in your day-to-day content creation. If anybody went to the IABC International Conference last year, Gabrielle Dolan was one of the keynote speakers. She is one of the world's best known experts when it comes to training people in storytelling. And she works with brands to help them extract their stories so you can share those with your target market and with your audience. So her name is Gabrielle Dolan. I think her keynote is still available on the IABC website. You might have to pay to access it, but I think Lisa we can pop that in the notes afterwards that go around with the link. But her presentation, which I didn't see, would have been excellent. And I know that because I've heard her speak on a number of occasions. And I actually interviewed her on a podcast a couple of years ago. And her, she just talks about the importance and how storytelling can help you engage with people, show your human side, and really help people to get to know you, so you develop that know, like, and trust factor. The other thing you need to think about is how can you be using video, how can you be better using images, and how can you be leveraging your content. One of the posts that I love the most is this one from Oreo. This was a post that went out on Facebook and Twitter during the Super Bowl. I think it was in 2011 or 2012. They had a blackout in the stadium. Now, Oreo knew that people would be turning to social media to find out what was going on. And so this went out on Facebook and Twitter within moments of the stadium blacking out. And you can see from the bottom of this tweet that it was retweeted almost 16,000 times. It was estimated that there was something like 5 million sets of eyeballs that saw this tweet and the Facebook post. And that compares to a couple of million people who were watching it both live and on TV around the world. So the number of people who saw the social media post far, far exceeded the number of people who actually watched the game. So this is a great example of some content that can go viral. But it told a story. Another one of my favourite examples is this one. This is from the Australian Tax Office. Yes, I know, who knew tax could be funny. They planned this post and it came out the day that Game of Thrones launched in Australia last year. So we've So think about how you can use current events as well. And then this is a great example of a hotel in Victoria. They run a come and stay with us over lunchtime on Valentine's Day. And this is the imagery that they use. So use clever images and stories. I'm getting the hurry up. So I'll 2 more minutes and then we'll go to some questions. Use video. Think about how you can use in-platform messaging. How can you use message bots on Facebook? How can you be using Instagram stories and other in-platform messaging with Facebook, Twitter, and with LinkedIn as well. The fourth is be organised. Look at how you can be creating editorial and content calendars. How can you manage approvals? So if you're getting questions, a common set of questions asked on social media, can you develop some approvals, some answers that can be pre-approved? So when the question is asked, you can just pop it in, answer it. Here's a list of useful apps. They'll be on my slides. I can send the URLs as well. These will save you heaps and heaps and heaps of time. Canva, Easel, and WordSwag are great apps for creating content. Wave and Ripple are video creation apps with stock images or with photos as the background. LastPass and 1Password are password saving sites. SmarterQueue, Hootsuite, and Buffer are absolutely fantastic in terms of scheduling your content and in terms of some social listening. They will help give you the data on who is liking, commenting on, and sharing your content, where they're from, what their demographic information is. If you're not using any of those, then check them out, because that might help you build a business case to get more resources to use your social. And it will really give you some good data to help you find out what content is working with your audience so that you can create more of that kind of content. And then finally, understand your analytics. When you set your benchmarks, have a clear understanding of what it is you're wanting to know. So if you're wanting to know, if you're wanting to use social media to increase engagement, either can increase engagement from your community or your customers, then you need to be developing some metrics that allow you to do that. And that might be metrics like the number of likes, comments, mentions, and shares that your posts get. But also look at what are the nature of these comments. Are people supportive? Are they happy? How engaged are your groups? If you're running Twitter chats, then how many people are engaging with you on those? Have a look at, the click-through to your website. How many of your posts and which posts are driving people to your website? And if they're driving people to your website and you have a sales process through your website, how are they impacting on your sales? How are they impacting on your lead generation? And how is that converting into sales? So knowing your analytics is really, really important, because it will help you get a greater understanding of what's working and what's not working in terms of your communication and your social media. But before you can get that understanding, you need to set goals and objectives that have metrics attached to them. Right. We've got a few minutes. I've got a few questions. So I'm just going to get out of that for a sec so that I can scroll down through the questions. If you've got any other questions, just pop them in the chat box. And I am looking for the first question. Template for social media strategy, I've answered that. And I can send you through that link. How do I calculate engagement rate? Well, it's depending on what you want to measure in terms of engagement. And it depends a little bit on what channel, social media channel you're using. Do you go by total number of engagement over the follower rate or over the impressions? That's a bit calculate engagement. So with your engagement, you want to set a benchmark, and then I don't just look at likes, follows, and shares. I look at engagement. It's a little bit more than a number, because you want to measure some quantitative some qualitative as well as the quantitative. So have a look at, and there's different schools of thought. So have a look at how many people, if you're on Facebook, for example, have a look at how many people like your page. Someone said to me once, they determine success or great engagement if they get more engagement, if their number of impressions is greater than the number of people who like their page. And they consider that a post has gone viral if it's 3 or more times the number of people who like their page. So for example, if you've got 1,000 people who like your page and you have a Facebook post that has 3,000 impressions, then they would consider that to be viral because it's got 3 times more. Does that make sense? Okay, one of the things I find hard with webinars is I can't get that those cues from you. So type in the box. Oh, great. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Question from somebody from the next question. Do you advocate for separate member versus external customer channels? Members often want to share posts to show expertise PD with their customers, but a lot of content relevant for members is not useful for customers. Content delights members when they can share. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. So if you're a member-based organisation, and I don't know where you're from, sorry, but if you are a member-based organisation, then think about having content channels that are only for members. So it might be a private Facebook group or a closed Facebook group, or it might be a closed LinkedIn group just for your members. If you're wanting to, the other thing you can do to demonstrate value to members is share their content where it's relevant for your audience. So the IABC does an awesome job of sharing my content. So they share blog posts that I write because it provides information that's of value to their members. So think about how can you be, and then I'm not sure what you mean by the difference, what the difference is between members and customers in your market. So content delights members when they can share. Can you just explain that a little bit more, and I'll come back to that. Next question is, could you do average engagement per post, likes plus comments plus shares? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So you definitely need to look at your engagement per post, because posts that get greater engagement means that you're hitting the mark in some way, and you need to have a look at what that might be. So is it because it's a funny meme, or is it because it's providing content that's really valuable? So this is where it's important to link some of your social media to your Google Analytics, where you're driving people to your website. So if you've got a blog, then have a look and see which blog posts resonate the most. Or if you've got, like I know there's a couple of things that I've shared on social media that have really resonated. There's tweets that get retweeted all the time because obviously it's content that's of value to people. So I have a look at that content and think, okay, why was that shared so much? And then I can replicate, maybe not the content, but the tone, or maybe I can write another post on that topic. So have a think about, look at what's working and what's not working. And this is not just in terms of the nature of the content, but the style. So if your video posts get huge traction, then keep doing video posts. If your written blogs don't get much traction, then maybe switch it around and maybe look at how can you do that as a video, or how can you do it maybe as a podcast or an audio. Hopefully that helps.
Mel, lots of great questions there, and I know there's more still, but I want to just allow a minute just to wrap up so we can finish right on the top of the hour. So did you want to just give a little bit of information about ways that people can connect with you after this podcast, after this web?
Yes.
Podcast?
Yeah, thanks very much. So thank you everyone for joining in. If you want any more information, I'm running a series of workshops in July. The dates are on the screen, and the website for more information is just my website, melkettle.com/events. Always happy to answer questions about those if you'd like any more information. And I've also written a book called The Social Association. where I go through these 5 skills in quite a lot more detail than we've had opportunity to do today. You can buy a signed copy from my website, or if you're international, then you would probably rather buy it from Amazon because you won't pay ridiculous postage from Australia, or you can get it as an ebook. So if you would like a copy of that, let me know. It's called the Social Association because I do a lot of work with member-based organisations, but the content is relevant for businesses more broadly. It's not just relevant for member-based organisations. And finally, a last plug. Whoops, if you want any more information about any of the services I provide, let me know. And finally, a plug for Fusion. If you've got a chance to get along, then please go.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mel. Fantastic presentation. I know there were still a lot of questions. I'm going to be sending out an email to all of you with a link to the recording of this, as well as a survey for you to provide some feedback. And we'll also drop in there some of the links to the materials that Mel referred to. So give us a few hours to gather those all together, and for the recording to come together, and we'll get it out to you hopefully either later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow. Thank you very much. Lisa McNally here from IABC Asia Pacific. Please feel free to reach out to me as well if you have any feedback, comments or questions about IABC or our webinar program. Thanks everyone.
Great. Thank you. Bye.